Joining me in our session of Dynamics GP versus Dynamics 365 Business Central, functionality similarities and differences is Don McNulty, who is a solution architect on our Dynamics GP practice, and Mike Harris, who is a team lead in our Dynamics 365 Business Central practice. Thank you both for joining us today. I will pass it over.
Okay. All right, so thanks very much for joining us all. Today we're going to go over some differences and similarities between GP and BC. There'll be both some similarities and some differences. So the first thing we're going to talk about here is the GP versus BC system differences. How does it operate and things like that. So in the GP world, everything is a client server, meaning that I have an on-premise server and I connect to that on-premise server or a hosted server that I connect using either remote desktop services or directly using a workstation. It's on-prem, requires a full install on each workstation that's going to operate it, that be a workstation or a laptop or an RDS server. It is non-web based. It can be run in a web browser with a piece of software that they provide, but it does require a on-premise or a hosted SQL server. When you purchase it by concurrent user. That means the first X number of people get in and the others have to wait till somebody else logs out. There's manual upgrades required. The upgrade of the actual database and the upgrade of the data itself is done on a periodic basis. The current streamlined way of doing it is on an annual basis. Each October they come out with a new release, and then you have to load it sometime in the next year so that you can load the next one the next year. There are infrastructure costs associated with running GP. Those infrastructure costs are the server costs, backup costs, security costs, as well as virus protection and things like that, which are all looked after using BC. There are a large number of third parties available, very robust third party environment. There's lots of different line of business applications available to run on against GP. They embed in GP, they look and feel like GP, but they are actually written by third parties. So, Mike?
Yeah, so with Dynamics 365 Business Central, you have a choice. So you can host on-premise, and the infrastructure requirements are very similar to what he has here on Dynamics GP. But the more common way of hosting is through software as a service. So with software as a service, it's cloud-based. You access the software through a web browser. The licensing, when it's cloud-based, is purchased as a named user. Because it's cloud-based, you have automatic updates, and these automatic updates happen. You have 2 major updates twice a year and some hot fixes a couple times a year. The major updates that happen, you can schedule them. So you'll have a time frame. You'll know that the major update is going to occur sometime in April, and you have maybe until the end of April or end of May to schedule the upgrade. But eventually, it's going to be forced upon you. The infrastructure cost is included with your subscription, and just like GP, there are multiple third-party application extensions that you can add into Business Central very easily through a marketplace.
Okay, so we'll talk about some functional similarities. These are things that both systems do well. Remembering that both these systems are ERP systems in their entirety, they have the basic functionality of entering transactions against GL, accounts receivable, accounts payable, purchase orders, sales orders, inventory. Both systems have them. They do them differently. So they're functionally the same, but they are entered differently. So we're going to show you some of those, and then we'll talk about some differences later on. So the first thing that we've got to talk about is they call it a smart list. We'll be showing smart lists and list pages. We'll be showing sales orders and sales documents in Business Central, purchase order documents, whether they be in BC or in GP, some fixed assets, some financial reports, some fiscal period control, and then a list of some other functional similarities, which we'll talk about as we go through there. So the first one we're going to talk about is smart list GP. Smart List is one of the most beloved pieces of GP. It allows us to easily add and remove columns and change the data from an ad hoc reporting thing. Users can define up to 4 search criteria, which allows the users to specifically dictate what kind of data they get on their screen. From there, we can then save that so that we can run it on a daily or weekly or monthly basis. And we can easily export that out to Excel. When we export it out to Excel, it can then be used for pivot tables and things like that. Users can also define these completely with the Smart List using the designer. There's a lot of other features and functionality inside Smart List that allows data from an ad hoc point of view for small reports and small amounts of data that makes it very, very efficient to get that data out so that you can do further analysis on it.
Okay, within Dynamics 365, you also have something very similar to Smart List. They're called list pages. So a list page enables you to pull up the information. Normally, it would be information coming from a subledger, but then you can filter it. So with some of the differences we have here between GP Smart List is that Business Central has unlimited filters. Just like GP, you can also add, remove, or move columns around. You can include what's called a flow field. And this is a calculated field. So you, for an example, you can show a historical trial balance through a list page. The views can be saved by user, so you can bring them up later. You can export any of these views to Excel. And if you want to create new views or new list pages, you can use a developer can create new custom list pages.
Okay, sales order processing. How do I get an invoice so that I get paid by my customer? So in GP, we have sales, they call it sales order processing. We have different document types. The document types, we have quotes, we enter the quotes. Quotes become an order, the order becomes an invoice or a back order. And then from there, we also have the ability to issue returns so that we can push through returns if there's an error in billing or somebody returns some product to us. The lines themselves on the actual invoices, once the header's been entered, are either inventory or non-inventory. If they're inventory, they can be allocated and fulfilled. And then once shipped, we can then post them and that will remove them from inventory. The sales documents themselves, the actual invoice document that gets sent to the customer, can be sent by email and can also have a different type of document by customer or by customer group. So we have a lot of customers who use multiple types so that they get different looks for different types of product. Imports. If I'm going to import any transactions from a web server or a line of business application, I need to have additional software to do that. Usually we use Smart Connect or Integration Manager. Those are the two that are most used. The screens themselves can be modified. It does take some IT support to do that, but they can be modified so that you can change your tab sequencing and change the order of which things are entered. You'll notice on the screen here that it's multiple screens for details and multiple screens for the different places inside GP. GP works on a multi-screen basis. We have our header and basic information that you see on the left, and then on the right you've got your detail information that shows you more information about each of the line items on a one-by-one basis. Once that's been entered and saved, it will then add to the right-hand screen. The posting itself posts it through to the Great Plains into the general ledger and can post either to or through the GL so that it becomes fully functional inside your chart of accounts.
Okay, with D365 Business Central, we also have sales documents. Similar to GP, we have quotes. You can move from a quote to an order, and then from an order to an invoice. You also have return and credit memo documents. We don't have the back order documents you have in GP. So your lines can either be a comment, it could be a GL account, an inventory item. You can use resources, fixed assets, or charge items as a line item. The sales documents can be customized per customer, meaning every customer can have their own sales invoice, and you can customize the email messages as well. To create the sales documents, you can use copy and paste from Excel, or you can use a built-in configuration packages to import documents from Excel. These pages can all be personalized by user, so any user can customize the columns they want to see or move fields around, and it just shows that way only for that user. And it's different from GP. Instead of having multiple pages that make up the sales document, you have you can expand or collapse, and you have grids that can be scrolled left and right, so everything's in one page.
Okay, next one is purchase orders. So now I got to buy the product that I just finished selling. I got to replace it. So what we've got here is we have purchase requisitions. So what we have in GP is we have a purchase requisition which can be entered and approved. Once the purchase has been requisition's been approved, we turn the requisition into a purchase order, and the purchase order is then sent to the vendor. Can be emailed to the vendor. You can have different types for each vendor if you wish. It then facilitates 2- and 3-way matching. In other words, when you get the product arrives at your door, if you haven't got the invoice yet, you can do a 2-way match at that point and say, this receipt matches this PO when we receive it. And then we can get an invoice in, which will then do a 3-way match, which says this invoice matches this receipt, which also matches this purchase order, hence the 3-way match. The line items can be inventory or non-inventory. As you can see here, I've got up top there, I've got the 2 ear, which is a piece of inventory, and then I've got paper towels, and those are just hand entered. Imports, again, additional software, that same comment about Smart Connect. Screens can be modified. Again, need some IT support in order to do that. It's not, and it is done as a more of a global change rather than an individual change. And then again, multiple screens for entries for details and shipments and invoices. So again, as you hit each of these items, as you add a new item, as you see on the right, you would enter your information there, and it's got many more fields to fill in if you wish, things like such as current vendor dates and in-house dates and things like that, so that you can include more information on each of the lines than what you see on the left-hand side. It's not mandatory that you go to the detail screens, but it is something that a lot of people will end up doing.
Okay, within Business Central, you also have purchasing documents. You can start from the purchase requisition. That requisition can become a purchase order. You can either receive your shipments and invoices from the PO screen or separately. So you can directly from the PO screen. I have a choice to do my shipment separately. I can receive the shipment here. I can also invoice from here, or I can do both at the same time. Or if I want, I could do my shipment from here and then later create an invoice and match the invoice to the shipment. So it still has the 2- or 3-way matching we were talking about with Dynamics GP. So again, your lines can be either comments or GL accounts. You can use inventory items or resources, fixed assets, or charge items. The purchase documents can be customized per vendor. So every vendor could have their own purchase invoice or PO, custom PO. You can use copy and paste from Excel. You can also use the configuration packages to import your purchase orders or purchase invoices. These pages can also be personalized by user. And again, instead of having multiple pages, you can expand or collapse, or you can use grids that can scroll from side to side. And then the shipment invoices I just mentioned earlier, they can be done from the PO screen directly or separately.
Okay. Next thing is fixed assets. There's a fixed asset module inside GP. It allows you to bring data in from the purchasing module and attach it into your fixed asset. So you've got a copy of the invoice attached to the actual document. We put in what kind it is. We've got an asset screen and then an asset book screen, which allows us to set the depreciation. There's about 9 or 10 different types of depreciation. All the standard ones are there: straight line, declining balance, some of the year's digits, and things like that. You set your originating life, you set your salvage value, you get your net book values. You can have multiple depreciation books. One book hits your general ledger, the other 2 would be for tax purposes ordinarily, has the various things. You can do averaging conventions. We can move things from a full period to half a period, so a half-year rule, half-month rule, whatever it is that you wish on the averaging convention. And then a switchover is if you have a lot of people will use a declining balance until 50%, and then they switch over to straight line for the remainder of the life of the asset, and that's available to you as well. You can track items themselves by physical locations you see on the Alpharetta, as well as the boardroom number 1. Has a label. You can label all your assets, so you've got barcode labels that you can add to there. There's a structure ID as well, which tells you what department or division they're in. You can also put it against a custodian, saying, I've got a cell phone and John has it, so John is responsible for it, and at the end of the day, when John leaves the firm, you can print a list of all the assets that he has access to. So he may have a cell phone as well as a computer. Assets themselves can also have sub-assets. You can see the number 1 up at the top there. That refers to, I have an asset, but then I've got 4 or 5 parts that are part of the asset. Each part of that asset can have a different depreciation rate to meet the IFRS requirements.
Okay, and with Business Central, it's very similar to what you have in GP. You can have multiple depreciation books. You can have various depreciation methods, including a custom method. So if your method is not already predefined, you can create custom depreciation methods. You can also track your fixed assets by location or assigned employee, just like GP. You can track item maintenance insurance, just like GP. And also your assets can contain sub-assets similar to GP.
Financial reports. The whole purpose of having an ERP system is to generate financial statements, and how we do it is in GP, we use a piece of software called Management Reporter, which comes with GP. It uses rows, columns, and trees. I'm showing the row section here. The rows can be done by category or account, and then your columns would be periods, year to date, etc. The tree allows you to run the same report across multiple divisions or multiple divisions and departments and have them roll up to the final number. There's drill down for the ability for the current period, but not for the year to dates. And then there's a consolidation requires an elimination entry that requires a third company. So if you've got 2 companies and you're trying to consolidate, you need a third company code as well in order to handle any intercompany eliminations that are required. So they'd be posted. The other one that we use a lot of inside GP is we will suggest JET reports, which is an Excel add-in that works also with Business Central, which I'm sure Mike will talk about.
Exactly. So with Business Central, we also have a built-in financial reporting tool. It's just called Financial Reports. It works on a similar concept. You have the rows, which you can see it there at the top, and you have columns, which is the bottom the bottom picture there. But you also, instead of having trees, we have what's called analysis views. So analysis views are pivots on one of your dimensions. And so you can combine the 3 very similar to GP. The formatting is slightly different from Management Reporter. When you get in here, you don't have as much functionality as you do in Management Reporter, but we also offer the JET reports as another popular option.
All right. Other things that are near and dear to a lot of accountants, especially, is fiscal period control. We've got in GP, you can close your period by your module. So I can close down sales and purchasing for December, but still have November, but still have November open for the general ledger while I finish my journal entries. It is done by across the board. This is a global setting. So once I've closed this is a soft close. They call it a soft close, in that there's no entries being done, and you can open and close them at will just by checking the boxes. The actual fiscal period itself is set by a first day and last day, and then the number of periods, and it will auto calculate that. And you can type in any date ranges, so you can do a 5-5, a 4-4-5 if required.
Okay, within Business Central, slightly different. We also have accounting periods, which can be custom periods. You can have similar to what you talked about, the 4-4-5 in GP. The closing process itself is different. So you have dates that you restrict access to. So you can globally restrict access for all users. So you see under General Ledger Setup where it says allow posting from and allow posting to. This right here would just mean all users would be restricted to December 2022. But you also have what's called deferral postings. So for deferrals, if they're posting a deferral journal, then it would, you have a greater range of when that can post into. One of the other differences is that you can override the global setting by user. So if I could go ahead and say everybody's restricted to December 2022, except for, and then if you look at the picture right above that one, where it says admin, we've opened November through the end of December for the admin user, but everybody else is December through the end, just December only. So it's not by module, but you can close for individual users. You can give them different closings.
Okay. All right, other similarities that we found that are kind of worth noticing. Both manufacturing and assembly is available in both systems. That allows us to combine items together to create new items at the end of the day, add labor charges and things like that. There's a pre-edit listing inside GP because of the batch nature of GP. There's a preview posting, I understand, inside Business Central. Intercompany processing, we can talk between two different databases. We have inventory tracking, so we can keep track of what we've got in stock, what we've got coming in, and what we've got going out. There's project accountings in part of GP, and there's a job-based inside Business Central, so they're very similar, just how you handle it and how we do the billings and things like that from there. Both systems handle multi-currency and allows revaluation of asset accounts as required for financial statement presentation. Both allow us multiple companies. GP's is unlimited and it's only space limited on the Business Central side. Landed cost is something that we need to add as we bring product in from overseas. As when it hits the border, we've got freight charges as well as duty. We use in GP they call it landed cost. In Business Central they call it charge items. Okay, so now let's just talk a bit about some differences. These are some of the differences. Now we didn't go into a lot of detail here because there's everything's got slight differences, but these are the ones that cause most people to think about whether it's a good fit for GP versus Business Central. We got the chart of accounts, we have the way that journal entries are handled and the way that entries are handled, and then batch posting versus direct posting. And then I got some other ones that we'll talk about. So in GP, we have a static structure for the chart of accounts. We set this to the number of segments that we want. We have a maximum of 10 segments, a maximum of 66 characters. The example shown on the screen here is a 3-segment structure that is 3-4-2. So in this particular case, the middle 4 numbers are the account number, the first 3 are the department, and the last 2 are the sub-accounts. So you have profit and loss accounts and balance sheet accounts. The difference between those two is very simple. One closes to retained earnings at the end of a fiscal year, and one does not. Things that we have in GP that we also have unit accounts. This allows us to put in one-sided entries that say I've got so many square feet, I have so many metric tons of product being shipped. I have allocation accounts. Allocation accounts are both available in both fixed and variable, so I can base it on another GL code or I can base it on a percentage. When I hit to those accounts, the amounts are never actually posted, but they actually post directly through based on the information at hand, directly to all of the allocated accounts. We have account categories. There are 48 default account categories inside GP, but you can add more and you can change the names of them as required. And there is an account roll-up function or feature available for reporting purposes as required. So you can say 6520 is my account. I want to see all my travel expense as one report. I can do that without having to worry about too much of the fact that I've got some in sales and some in marketing. Okay.
Right, and with Business Central, so you're moving from a segmented account structure to a dimensional account structure. So the biggest difference you'll see here is you have just one account as your main account. Now with this main account, you can also have, instead of using roll-ups, I can have header and total fields. So you can see these under, for an example, you see where it says total assets account 10990. That's just a totaling account. It's totaling all of my assets. You can have total, begin total, and end total accounts, as well as header accounts. Your accounts can have categories similar as GP. You can create custom categories. And you can have, instead of having just limited to 10 segments, you can have unlimited dimensions. So normally your main account segment in GP becomes your account here on the chart of accounts, and then your segments become your dimensions normally. You can have what's called global dimensions or shortcut dimensions. There's 2 global dimensions, and those are usually your primary dimensions, and then the rest become shortcut dimensions. The main difference is that global dimensions show up everywhere within Business Central. They're on every page almost, whereas shortcut dimensions, sometimes you have to drill into those to see them. Okay.
Journal entries. We've got, like we showed before, we have screen-based entry. GP only handles positive numbers. There is very few places in GP where you enter a negative number. Most of the time you just enter them into the debit column or the credit column accordingly. There is a detail copy paste from Excel, which is nice, as well as the ability to back out existing entries. There is only one currency per journal entry. Each line item, the header is where you control your currency, so that you must balance it in both the foreign currency and the domestic currency, or the originating and the functional, as we call it. There is a reversing entry allowed, and that reversing entry will then post 2 entries, one in one period, one in the next. Both periods must be open, as we talked about earlier. Because it's batch-based, we can put these into a recurring batch, so I can post this same transaction for X number of months if required. This does not affect the subledger. Anything I do here will only affect the general ledger. It has no reference to the subledgers at all. Entries to the subledgers must be done at the subledger level. I can also post to the current year as well as the previously closed year. So I can do a prior period adjustment for audit adjustments at the end of the year. If I want to go back any farther than that, it requires reopening of the fiscal year from the previous year so that we can get back to the one right before it. We can open those up if required, but it does take a fair amount of work to do so, so it's not easily done.
Okay, journal entries within Business Central. So you have the same concept of a general journal, but you can also hit any of your subledgers from a journal. And so to enable this, you have what's called journal templates. And so for an example, we might have a general journal template, we have a sales journal template, a purchase journal template, and each template just offers you, different fields that might be available for that type of entry. So this example you're seeing here is a general journal template. And you can see like the 4th line down where it says customer, that means we're hitting the customer ledger directly. It'll hit the AR account as well as that customer. The last line there will hit the vendor account. So it's hitting the vendor account as well as AP. You have a choice. So you have what's called an amount field, and your amount field would be positive for debit, negative for credit, or you can show the debit and credit fields, or you can show both. You can show amount plus debit plus credit columns. Each of these journals, you can use copy and paste from Excel to populate. They can all be customized through personalization. So fields that you don't normally use, you can hide, and you can add in other fields. It's for your user only. You can use multiple currencies per journal. The exchange rates can default in from your exchange tables, but then they can be overridden on the journal. You can do reversing of posted entries. We can copy posted entries into new entries. And we also have what's called recurring journals. That it's not a recurring batch, but it's a recurring journal that you can run, multiple times. So you can schedule that, and then you can post into any historical year. After you post into a historical year, you just rerun your closing process, and that updates your retained earnings.
So next, we're going to talk about batch posting. GP runs everything through a batch. Even though there is a transactional post, it still puts it into a batch with the person's name on it, but it is a batch style posting. So individual tractions in all modules. So all modules when I enter an individual module or transaction, as you see on the left, we have both a save or a post. They are mutually exclusive. We either save or we post. We can't do both. So if I save it to a batch, I can then save it. I can enter a bunch of journal entries or a bunch of AR entries or a bunch of AP entries, print out an edit list, and get it approved, and then come back and post the whole batch as a set. We can post individually by hitting the post button, and that will then bypass that. In the background, it actually does assign a batch to that particular transaction. We can also post by batch. So when we bring up that batch, we bring up the batch, and you'll see the one that's in the middle. It says that there's 2 transactions in there. And then we can also approve those batches. So we can send that batch around for approval and get approval for it so that you can then approve it, so that you can hire a temp to do some data entry and then send it to somebody who wants to look at it. There's also a post all batches. I've only shown the one for the series GL, but there is also the availability to do this by each of the modules has a series post, as well as there's a master posting, which allows you to post all batches from all modules all at once. And again, you can use that batch approval process that you can see in the middle one. It's got the user ID and the approval date at the bottom, and then the checkbox for approval. And it asks for a password each time you hit the approve button so that you can approve that to move forward.
Okay, within Business Central, one of the biggest things you're going to find different is the way it handles batches. So Business Central does have batches, but it only has them for journals. So you see that top one, that was my general journal screen, and then I have 3 different batches in my general journal screen. You can also do batch level approval, just like you can in GP workflow, or you can do line level approval workflow. The bottom screen, what we're seeing there, this is a list page coming from the sales, I think this was the documents. So you can do what's called batch posting. So I can multi-select a bunch of different documents that are still open within there, and then I could post as a batch, meaning together, but they're not actually within a batch like you would see, like a container like you would see within GP. And so one of the biggest things people ask about is their edit list. So because we don't have edit list in Business Central, we have what's called posting preview. So a lot of functionality where you go to post, you'll see the option to do a test post or a preview posting. You can click on that, it looks for errors, and it will show you a summary of all the postings that will occur if everything's successful.
Okay, other things that we've done. GP itself, it includes US payroll, it includes Canadian payroll, it includes human resources. They are not third parties, they are completely built into GP, just load them off the download. It has a depot management system to go with its service module so that you can have a depot, so that you can do warranty repairs and things like that. It supports Interfund. Interfund allows me to maintain a balance sheet for a division or a department within one chart of accounts, and maintains to make sure that the individual segment of that account is then balanced on the balance sheet. Custom screens themselves require power users. So you really need somebody who knows what they're doing in order to customize the screens. And when they do so, they're customizing those screens for a large number of people rather than single individuals in most cases. Mike?
Okay, yeah, on the BC side, some functionality you have there that's not within GP. You have built-in multi-currency updates, so you can automatically update your exchange tables from a feed. We have what's called linked bank accounts. So you can link your bank account and import your transactions from your bank without having to go through create a bank statement. You have configuration packages where you can load data directly into Business Central that goes through the business logic from Excel. You have a warehousing module that includes barcoding. We have the concept of a consolidation company. So this is a separate company within Business Central that you would import transactions from other companies to consolidate them together. It handles multi-currency exchange, and you can also do eliminations directly in the consolidation company. We have a module for marketing and running campaigns. And then for personalization, users can do their own personalization that applies only to them, or you can do what's called a design change, which is a global change for all users.
So those are some of the similarities and differences that we felt that stand out to us as important to understand. And I'm going to hand it back to Tess.
Thank you, Don and Mike. That was a great overview of some of the similarities and differences we get asked about the most when Dynamics GP users are thinking about moving to Dynamics 365 Business Central. And have a great rest of your day. Thank you, everyone.